Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our listeners. This is Arun Changamveetil here, and along with me, I have my co-host Nicole McNamara.
Hi, Arun. Good morning.
Hi, Nicole. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Who Moved My Career. Today, we have an incredible guest, and we're going to talk about some really insightful areas. And the area that we want to focus today is career transitions. Whether by choice or circumstances, it has tendency to mess with your head. One day you're on top of the world. Next day you're questioning everything around you. How did I get to this space? So in this new world, how do you mentally stay sharp, strong, while your career is taking unexpected turn? In this episode, we sit with the one and only Matt Seiler, founder of Accelerators, to talk about emotional and psychological toll of career shifts and how to protect yourself, your emotional well-being while navigating this change. Matt has coached numerous executives through some of these tough transitions, and he's here for you. He's here for all of us. He's here to help us being resilient, confident, focused. So today, the topic is protecting your psyche. And it's all about instability and how one is feeling today in this new world, whether it is federal layoffs, whether it is tech layoffs, whether it is manufacturing layoffs. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Arun. Always a pleasure to see you, Nicole. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation. As we were leading in, we were talking about the general sense of instability that I think each of us feels. And that's independent of our moment in our career trajectory. So it's wild and wacky times. Let's talk about it.
Awesome. So Matt, before we begin, I was reading about you doing homework for this podcast, which Nicole and I do all the time. You have an incredible background. Could you share a little bit with us and your audience, your past history, what you've done as an executive? Would love to know more before we get into it.
Sure. Yeah. So I spent much of my career in the advertising space, and I joined it at the time that agencies really were agents working on behalf of their clients. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It was pre the creation of holding companies. And that began to change things, and it started to shift away from agent working on client behalf. And I continually searched through the marketing communications ecosystem, if you will, for the right spot to actually take charge of our client's business and truly function as a partner. So I was what's called an account executive through the client service from domestic to global clients at the agency level, and then I did it at the holding company level. I ran a creative agency, and then I thought that media was probably the right altitude in which to really take charge of client business because of the concentration of spend. So I went to be CEO of one of Omnicom's media agencies domestically, and then I went over to IPG to run first a global agency and then a global agency network. And that's all my agency life. And I'll pause because I don't want to monopolize, but there was a moment as I was in my 8th year as CEO of IPG's $2.5 billion media operations when I discovered the drive to do what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. So Nicole, over to you. I know you're in the podcast driver's seat today.
Doing my best, holding on with both hands, Arun. Well, Matt, I'm super excited to have you here today. I think you and I met in kind of the way that life should meet new people and you should be connected. And the idea was the person that introduced us said in their first note, good people should know good people. And so, fellow good person, thank you for joining us today. You and I have since spoken about a bunch of things, but I have so enjoyed getting to know you and really appreciate your perspective on some of the mental stuff that's going on. But before we get into that, let's talk about instability, generally speaking, right now, because I think your point of view, when you said it to me, I was like, yes, our audience has to hear this because I don't think we talk about it enough because we're looking at our belly button so often. So help us understand your point of view on macro level instability and what it's doing to our psyches at moments of career transition.
Yeah, it really is, I think, the unstable foundation upon which all of us are sitting right now. And it happened before COVID, but certainly COVID was a major destabilizer. And we're an amazingly adoptive, flexible human species, but we shouldn't have been able to go through a mass pandemic and working from home and recognition of just how fragile we all are without there being some collateral damage. And then we went from that to a massive hiring. Everybody was being hired. Remember all the memes? There would be funny little things of, yes, I'm a murderer, and no, I have no skill set, but of course you'll hire me anyway. And then immediately after that came the great de-hire. It started with Google, really, but everybody realized that they had way over-consumed when they hired. And so they started vomiting back all of those bodies they brought on. And that created a tremendous sense of instability. You throw in where we've been with DEI and the pendulum swing from if you were a person of color, a female, it was very difficult to get a role, to if you weren't a person of color or a female, it was very difficult to get a role, to now, which is, eliminating any record of there having been people of color or women in key positions. That contributes to a sense of instability. Throw in a little global climate change while you're at it, the amount of incredible instability that comes with Pacific Palisades burning down, and on and on and on into this election cycle where I think that some people were surprised that the decision was made to reelect Trump, and then people have been surprised by what's happened in this relatively short period with the new administration. So, and now the market, there's such incredible instability in the market. So I don't know, did I miss anything? What feels stable?
The good news is that most of the rest of the world is very peaceful right now. Nothing really going on, not a whole lot of gauntlets being thrown. So we have that going for us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. And then, I think we don't always take into consideration that while it is us trying to find something new for us, we also exist in this massive ecosystem that is really unsure of itself right now. And I think, I remember when the election came around last year, everybody thought, well, if we can be sure of one thing, it's going to be that the market is going to be up and jobs are going to come back and there's going to be crazy M&A activity. And that hasn't happened either. And so I think people are like, when is that coming back?
Totally. You're absolutely right. You think about, again, regardless of where one's politics lie, when Trump was reelected, the market responded immediately. And I work with a lot of private equity firms, and there has been a kind of pause on any significant investment really for 2 years. So it was finally going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so there was a moment, I think, of, again, regardless of one's politics, a moment of economic excitement or optimism that lasted for all of 2 months, maybe.
Yeah, it was quick.
Yeah. But, if you think about that as the backdrop, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but if you think of that as the backdrop, we are all fairly egocentric. And so when we're not getting the responses that we're looking for, we are hurt by that. And we think that people are doing us wrong. And what we probably need to do is think, man, if I'm feeling that unstable in my life, so too probably are all the people around me. And so it's not like I'm wobbly, everybody else is on solid footing. We're all wobbly.
Yeah. And I think most of our listeners are wobbly. And that was the idea that why are Arun and I just talking to each other about this? Or, our friend Sam, why are she and I just talking about this? And they're all 5-10% different in terms of what brought you to this moment, in terms of where you are on your journey of transition. But we are all wobbly, and that's okay. And so I would like to believe that more wobbly people add some level of stability. We're all wobbling together. But it's a wild time. Now I can't get that graphic out of my head. So, I mean, you have spent your life, you were a CEO of a huge organization. You've since done amazing things with a whole bunch of other CEOs. What's the biggest challenge you see people face when they find themselves in this moment of transition?
So I'll go back to where I cut my story off in the intro. So I'm a renovator. I like fixing broken things. And the reason why I kept trying to find that right place within the agency ecosystem was because it was broken and I wanted to fix it, and I wanted to fix it on behalf of the client. And I went to IPG because IPG's stock was in the toilet. The agency that I went to run hadn't won a new piece of business in 3 years. And it was 2008. And so if you'll recall, that was a global economic meltdown too. That was my siren song. Like, everything is a mess here. Total hairball. Yes, please. And I had a great team and a lot of good fortune and some pretty solid strategy that led us to a complete turnaround. The first year, we actually doubled revenue globally. And then for the next 7 years, we had at least double-digit growth. So it was no longer a renovation job. It was much more a maintenance job. And I'm just not cut out for maintenance. But I was sticking around because I was one of 3 potential successors to take over for Michael Roth, who was the CEO of IPG. It became clear that that wasn't going to happen. And so I quit stupidly. And I quit without thinking about a lot of things that I help all of my clients think about. So the first thing was, and this is only applicable to people in the space from which I come, but I didn't realize that agency people were considered to be almost business people, but not quite. And that was an issue if you wanted to get out of the agency business, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to go run a publishing company. Specifically, I wanted to go run Time Inc. because I thought that Joe Rip was the wrong CEO, because he was. So I didn't realize that people didn't look at agency people the same way they look at other people. I also didn't understand the truth of round pegs for round holes, which is I didn't come from publishing, and so they didn't see me as a publisher. I thought, like, okay, is $2.5 billion and those kinds of results not good enough for you? And I've had those kind of results in my other CEO roles as well. The answer was no, it's not good enough for you. We don't understand things that don't look and act just like us. And the third was, in order to be renovated, you have to know that you're in need of renovation. And there was an awful lot of denial. There was an awful lot of, yeah, we got legacy models, we got affiliate deals, whatever that was keeping them propped up. So about halfway, I had to stick around for a chairman year. So about halfway through my chairman year, I reached out to one of the few headhunters that I like and said, I would like to hire you as my agent, because I feel as if I were to pay you, I'd get the attention that I need in order to navigate this shift. They thought that was a very interesting concept and came back with a proposal that they admitted was ridiculous. They wanted a massive amount of money to take me on as their client, and they wanted all the transaction fees.
And I'm sorry, just to be clear, Matt, you're talking about just you, just Matt.
Just Matt. Yep.
Okay.
So they truly an insane amount of money. So I went to run an influencer marketing platform, thinking of it as an externship. If you can't see me as a media owner, I'll just become one. But instead of it being that externship, what happened there was I looked at the 1,200 influencers that were creating our network, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, etc. And the thing they all had in common was an agent. And I paused and thought, why does Hollywood have agents and sports celebrities have agents and YouTubers have agents? Why don't Arun, Nicole, and Matt have agents? And I decided that was a significant enough question that that's what I wanted to do. So I've been doing that ever since. So I'm in my 7th year of being an agent, working with senior leaders and helping them to get what it is that they want. And there's a lot of navigation in order to make that reality come true.
I love this idea of agents because it's a great idea, but it's also a model that we have seen work for other people. And, you know, I'm a believer in that saying, good artists copy, great artists steal. And we know that that works. But you did something really important there, which was you identified a very clear problem statement first, and then said, I know that I can scale this and get started. What has the response been to the agent idea? I mean, I would say that, you know, one of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast is there is a gap in the market between people who will give you coaching about your career and people who will write your resume for you and people who will build an online presence for you. But none of it's really comprehensive. And it all feels a little, I mean, tactical sometimes downright predatory. So like, help me understand where you're focused and how you're meeting that gap in the market.
It's funny. I don't think that I have ever said, when I describe the business as being CAA for the rest of us, I don't think ever I have heard a response other than, oh, that's such a great idea. Everybody gets it immediately. When you get into the rest of the market, as you say, Arun, when you talked about executive coaching, I kind of throw up in my mouth when I hear that. I think there's just a lot of hacky people that kind of ran out of career. And so they went into the coaching business because anybody can put up a shingle and hope somebody will pay. There's a lot of names for a lot of things that suggest that they are providing more of a service than in fact they are. The agenting business, the way that Hollywood sports celebrities, YouTube work is I go to work for you. And that goes back to my agency days. The root of agency is agent. And so I fully commit to serving my clients and what their needs are. And as you said, there's a clarity in what I do, and that's what I do with the individuals within my work. I help give them clarity. And I have a process through which I work. There's a brief that we use that I can take you through. But it always starts with the objective. And one of the things that I think that we have a tendency to get wrong is we're too general in what it is we're looking to do, especially if somebody moved our career, especially if we're feeling less confident, because, in my case, I had a $38 billion client spend. If I called somebody, they would absolutely pick up because I control a lot of money, a lot of client relationships. When you no longer have that, that changes the relationship in many cases. So people who are feeling less confident because they no longer have the CEO title or they no longer have a huge budget or what have you, they tend to be more broad because they want an opportunity. And so what happens when they're too broad is nobody knows what to do with them. They don't know how to think about that person. And there's an adage, if you attempt to be all things to all people, you end up being nothing to nobody. And that's what happens. And if you end up being nothing to nobody, you have a ton of conversations, many of which you shouldn't be having. But, busy feels better than idle because nobody ever calls me. I better be busy talking to people. And so you talk to people all the time and they, they're nice and they're in your network somewhere and they say, hey, Nicole, it was wonderful to meet you. And then that's it. They have no idea what to do with you because you weren't specific enough about what it is you wanted and why you're uniquely qualified for that. So a lot of our work is helping people figure out what it is they actually want to do. And that's the hardest part because people are generally too broad. And then we get into, very specifically what kind of company, what size, what's happening there right now. I'm a big moment believer, as in what's the moment that organization is going through that makes them particularly interesting to you and vice versa. Again, I'll pause there because that's over talk on your question.
Two things
Nicole,
that I'm sorry.
Nicole, I have a question on it. So I think this is a common mistake that people make early on in the job search because one is overwhelmed by this loss, uncertainty that is there in the market, and then people just peanut butter their impact, peanut butter their skills, and cast the net wide, and they become like so busy, and then later on realize that holy smokes, I spent all this time and I haven't gotten anything anywhere, and it's very, very relevant in today's job market because there's a mismatch between because there's a lot of candidates there. So people are very, very specific with all sorts of criterias on one side, the candidate job fit, and the candidates are like peanut buttering themselves. So there's that mismatch. So you mentioned strategies. Could you talk a little bit more about how do one get themselves through this decision tree of how should I think about this? What is it that I want to do? Right? I'm sure there's a decision tree around it. So could you talk a little bit more about it?
So as I said, it starts with a brief, and I won't assume that all of your listeners know what a brief is, but a brief is the foundation for marketing communications. And I'll say this fast, but it's objective, strategy, target audience. What do they currently think? What do you want them to think? Single-minded proposition, and 3 reasons to believe. So all of our work begins with that brief. There's 3 parts of it that matter most. The objective is by far and away the most important. That's where we spend most of our time. And so what I want is for you, my client, to feel like I'm painting you into a corner. I want you to feel like I'm asking you to find a needle in a haystack. And that's about when you got it right. Because that level of granularity means that when I'm talking to Arun and Nicole, they're like, oh, I don't have that, but my buddy Matt does. Because they know exactly now, because you were precise about what it was, that they're supposed to be listening for. That's the most important. The second is, what does the target audience currently think? That's whatever the barriers are. And this, again, is where being an agent is really important, because I tell the truth. And so I will say to my client, the problem you're going to face is your age, your gender, that you've jumped around a lot, that you stayed in the same place for too long, that the company that you're associated with doesn't have a positive perspective out there in the market, like whatever the issues are. And then the last is, what are the 3 reasons to believe? And those need to be very concrete, very performance oriented. So the way that it goes is, I want to do this. I'm not sure you can. The heck I can't. I've done it this time, and this time. And that's our foundation. And then we can say, okay, who would be the right organizations for that? Like, who are the proxies? It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to reach out right now to company X, Y, or Z, but who seems like they're closest in on satisfying that brief? And then we go about changing the LinkedIn and the CV to make sure that they line up with that. And also to make sure that anything you're communicating externally through the socials reinforces that. Like, don't be just randomly liking things, commenting things, etc. Only like and comment and share and write about the thing that is very specific to that thing that defines your next step. And then we do the outreach. And there's a whole next chapter of this conversation of what happens when you reach out to people with that very, very, very clearly defined reason why you should want me, and they don't respond because they don't.
What's the response rate you see? Like, what's the worst and best case scenario?
I always say to my clients, let's assume that you're going to reach out to 10 individuals. I would assume no greater than 2 of those.
I was thinking 20% hit rate. That's not a metric you're psyched about in advertising, but I think it's a reality.
No, and that's if you're performing well. Now, granted, in those instances, you are reaching out hopefully to warm connections, not pure cold, and you're reaching out with something very specific. But this is where we talked about the instability that we are all facing. The other thing that's happened is we have become very impolite. And again, without regard to one's political leanings, you see that in our behavior at the highest level in the country and then throughout really too many of our relationships. We're just not nice. We're not polite. We're not selfless in ways in which we used to be. And I think that social media is too often blamed for all things, but I think that social media does play a significant part in this, where we are so inundated with information that's coming through the socials and everywhere else, and we see stuff. We just aren't habituated to necessarily respond to it. You put something up on LinkedIn, a huge number of people get an impression. They saw it, but they didn't do anything. And then some people liked it or loved it or whatever. Maybe they read it, maybe they didn't. And then a few people actually comment, which shows that they actually read it. And what happens is we scroll through stuff and we get a little bit of it. But if you're that person sending a note to somebody saying, hey, I could make a real difference for your business and I want to talk, and they're scrolling past that, what do? How do you stay in front of them in a way that gets them to actually swipe left or right, whichever the direction we're supposed to swipe in? And that's That's where recognizing that people are busy, they are overwhelmed, but they're also just not as polite as they once were. And speaking of polite, getting to a fast no is almost as good as a fast yes. Just tell me no, you're not interested, you have nothing. Great, thank you. Don't make me chase. Don't make me look desperate. And so the way you don't look desperate is you keep a relatively limited number of targets. I say somewhere between 10 and 20. It's too hard to keep track of more than 20. And you are monitoring the individual to whom you reached, the organization, their close competitors, and then sort of macro data. So that instead of what you want to do on the second outreach, which is to say, hey, dirtbag, how about a response? Or the third one of like, I hope this never happens to you, shoe on the other foot, etc. Instead, what you do is you say, hey, I saw the news about X. Thought that was really interesting. Love your perspective. Or congratulations on Y. Or, a little worried about Z. And you just stay in front of them. And you have this sort of relentless campaign of positivity and stay there. And by doing that, you also show them who you are as a person, and you show them what it would be like having you on their team, which is constantly coming up with ideas and thoughts and staying in front of them and being helpful.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest takeaways from this is the headline: replace transactionality with thoughtfulness. Especially in the world that we are living in, it's very easy to jump in and say, hey, what happened to this that I sent you? And I haven't heard anything back. And, time kills all deals. So be thoughtful about it, have a communication plan, and stick to it, and it will happen. That's kind of, personally,
I hope it will happen. It may not. I mean, there are plenty of instances in which you will not get a response, and that's okay. So that list of 20, you keep fresh, which is after a certain number of outreaches, if they haven't responded, they're not going to, and that's okay. So replace, the 4 that aren't going to respond with a new.
Yeah. So one last question, Nicole, on this topic. So 8 out of 10 will not get anywhere, let's say. So how do one handle that emotional roller coaster of things not happening?
It's hard is the answer. One of the things that we can all do better is to make sure that initial 10 to whom you reached were the right 10. Because if you're reaching to the wrong people, they're not going to respond, or if they do respond, it's not going to be with anything positive. So that goes back to that objective setting. You will significantly increase your chances of being right by doing the hard work first. The second, though, is proactivity. If you're just waiting for somebody to respond to you and they don't, that's a terrible, terrible feeling. And if you're responding to LinkedIn posts, don't do that. They're not real. None of those things is a real thing. Like the numbers of people who say like, I applied to X, Y, I've used X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to keep using the alphabet, but I tried all these things and nobody responded. I'm like, it's because those jobs aren't real. Don't do that. That's a stupid waste of your time. But if you're proactive, if you're reaching out to the right opportunities, if you're finding news, if you're interested, literally, and legitimately interested, which you should be in these opportunities, then that's not homework. It's not a hardship to be keeping track of what's going on around. So you put yourself into the protagonist role, and that's a really important thing to do. And the other is have conversations like this. Recognize that you're not alone. This is what's happening in the world. It's okay. Be a little vulnerable. Be willing to share what your trials and travails have been, but also do share the positives. When somebody does respond, be appreciative of that. I am mortified. I am the biggest critic of non-response. And sometimes people will hit me up and say like, hey, you haven't responded. I'm like, oh, Jesus, how could I have fallen prey to that? Like, that's my biggest pet peeve. But that's the thing you also have to recognize. And I said that before about we're all unstable. So too are the people that we're trying to get. So sometimes we are just busy. Like sometimes it wasn't that they are rude. Sometimes it isn't that they're not interested in you. They missed an email. It's okay.
I think one of the things we talked about in episode 1, Matt, was when you get laid off, in this example, when you get laid off, you get 3 types of phone calls from people, right? The sorry sayers, the crash TV people, and the people who actually really care. But you got to know what those things are. And so one of the things we were talking about is you are going to be getting phone calls when you are in this spot. But one day when you find your next gig and when you move on to it, someone else is going to be calling you or responding or reaching out to you in LinkedIn. And I think it's important to also say, like, most of our audience is thinking about transition, but one day you're not going to be. And you're going to have a bunch of people around you who are.
Like, where did he go?
I think you go with me.
Yeah. I'm
I
not
think, where did he go?
only to that question. I'm walking out of the room. I was
Like you were doing a demonstration.
I was getting yeah, exactly. I was, this is how it feels when somebody,
Yeah, that's helpless. Thank you. I feel it.
I just saw that my battery light was on and I thought it would be awkward if I suddenly lost the connection.
Not to worry.
Would you mind terribly repeating the question? Because now I'm focused.
Okay, no problem. So we talked about in episode 1, this idea that when you are the laid off person, you get 3 types of phone calls. One is the sorry sayers who are there to like make themselves feel better about their situation. Another one is the car crash. They're there for the blood and the gore and who are we mad at? And then the other ones who are really there to help and ready to answer the call if you have it. And so we talk about what it feels like when you are the receiver of those phone calls. But one day you will find your next thing. You will move on to the next big role. And then someone will call you in that same position. And I think we also want to, most of the people who are listening to this podcast are either thinking about transition or in transition, but they won't always be. And so I think it's equally important, if we're gonna kind of have this movement of kindness and stability again, that we also speak to those who are the receivers of those outreaches. Like, you have a responsibility for the greater good to try and do your best to help others in this moment. Yeah. So and I think people forget that because they are busy. I get it. But and I was always, I think, relatively good about responding to those. I'm sure I wasn't perfect. But to your point, when you're in this moment, remember that you will not always be, and you have a duty to pay it forward.
There's a terrible truth, and I've never understood it, that the abused become abusers. And you see it, unfortunately, in families where the parents that were abused end up abusing their children. You see that in the professional services space where people who were agency and then become clients are tyrannical clients. So unfortunately, our memory is short, and or we feel like if we had to suffer other shit too. And I don't think that that's acceptable. I think that what each of us has a responsibility to is not just our own lives and career paths, but to those of the people around us. And with that responsibility, to me, comes the ask for clarity. And it's always going to come down to that. When somebody reaches out and says, hey, Nicole, bummer, they laid us all off and I could use a little help. What is incumbent upon all of us is to say, okay, be really clear with me. What is it that you want and how can I be helpful? And know that they won't be specific enough, so you're going to have to draw that out. What we have a tendency to do is a friend in need calls and we want to pass them along as quickly as possible. So maybe Arun can help that person. And so you should talk to Arun. All done. Mm-hmm. You need to pause before you make that intro to make sure that you're not going to be damaging your friend or your business colleague's psyche by just continuing to pass them along to people that aren't really in a position to help, because what do they really need? So that, I think, is our role as colleagues, friends, is to really ensure you understand what it is they're looking for. And that's probably going to start with you helping them to figure out what it is they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. We're going to role play. I didn't tell you we were going to do this, but I want to take this thread that you started with when somebody asks you how they can help. And I want to pretend like you've asked me, Matt, how can I help? And my response to you is, I'm looking for something in customer success, or maybe I'm looking for something in strategy, or I could also be really good in transformation, or I could also be the head of solution engineering. And I say that to you. And what's your response?
I'm so glad you asked that. One of the things that I say to prospective clients and clients, that part of my job is to get rid of the ors. And I don't mean send you out on a life raft without them. What I mean is anytime I hear somebody say, I could do this, or I stop them. There are no ors. You can't say I could do customer service or I could do sales. I could be in a large organization at a more junior level, or if it were a smaller organization, it would be at a more senior level. Like, no, what do you want? Be really specific. Don't ask me to do the work for you, not in my role as agent, but don't ask your network to do the work for you. Do the work yourself. And it's hard to do. And sometimes you need somebody like me or others to help you figure out what the truth is because you're blocked to it. But like right after this, I have a call with a new client, very, very, very successful, very, very, very senior person in a very admired organization. And she would like to move on to another role, probably as a CEO within the next year. And the way our work has begun is getting really specific about what do you want? And part of that is going back to when has it worked best so far? Again, I love moments. So where were the moments within your organization where things were really firing on all cylinders? And let's investigate what was happening then. Like, who was around you? What were you doing? How did you measure it? That kind of stuff. So there's a lot of breadcrumbs that our careers leave for us that we can apply to the path forward. But no ors. You're not allowed to have any ors. By the way, if any of us is confused, and it's fine to be confused, even after doing that kind of rigorous work, then you can do two briefs. I'm going to do a brief as if it were on customer relations, and I'm going to do another brief as if it were on investor relations. And I'm going to see when I get down to the bottom with the reasons to believe which of them is more compelling. Like, which of those actually is the thing I want to do? And it's perfectly fine to go through the exercise of more than one if you're doing it to get to only.
Because here's, and that's so, I think that last bit is so important because let's say I get you on a call and your background is in advertising, you were at a CEO level. I've made multiple assumptions about where I think you might be able to help me. And so now I'm tailoring my answer to where I think you might be able to be helpful when in actual fact, that becomes about you as like not about me anymore. Right. So, cause I see this happen. I've been guilty of it. Right. I where you're like, well, I want to make sure I'm broad enough so that this person can help me. If I'm too specific, they're going to be like, sorry, can't help you. And that's a really scary place for people to be because they're like, oh, I don't want to close the door on this. And if I'm too specific and they don't have anything in that area or they don't know anybody in that area, I've now screwed myself in the process.
I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to mask the identity of this person, though I don't think she would mind if I actually did say who it was. But I ran an event a year or so ago with who's who in the private equity and public sectors. And I did a fireside chat with a legendary head of sales who had left a very famous organization and went to another one and it didn't work out. And they had decided that what they wanted was a CEO role, more to convince themselves that they could be a CEO. And they went deep into private equity, meeting with a bunch of central resource and then portcos around CEO roles. Cut to prior to my having done the fireside chat with this former famous head of sales, one of the private equity talent acquisition people had said, yeah, we met with this person before. We were really unimpressed. And so when this person ended up taking another role, it was great because we were able to dodge a bullet, which was an astonishing thing to hear about this person because I've truly never heard anything but positives. And now back to this individual meeting with all of those heads of talent and portfolio and so on and so forth. Through that, they realized that wasn't actually what they wanted to do and ended up doing some board roles instead. After the fireside chat, that head of talent came up to me and said, where the hell was that person? We didn't meet with them. We totally missed out. And I tell you that story because this individual was using those conversations to figure out what it was that they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. but just know that that's at the sacrifice of finding a role within any of those targets. You don't get to go back and try to make a good first impression. Those decisions were made. So if you're going to talk to somebody because you're really looking for help in figuring out what the heck it is you want to do, just know that you've probably crossed that person and their organization off of your list of where you might be. And that's okay, but be very choiceful about, have the more general conversation. Be clear again on what your objective is with each of the interactions you have. If you're saying my objective here is to learn from you, totally fine. If your objective is to try to get a job from them, very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think having that honest conversation with yourself goes back to where we started, which is the psyche moment, because your mind will play tricks on you. I mean, there have been moments, a lot of people talk to me, they're like, these are badasses I'm talking about. And they're like, I'm too scared to call this person because I don't really know what I'm going to say. And my confidence is so shaken that I'm worried I'm going to, they're going to think I'm a joke, or I'm not going to have something intelligent to say, or, and so you can tell me if this is insane, but my response is, I have this saying that fear is a reason to try harder. And so that's what I tell them. I'm like, you need to practice more. You need to do more research. You need to feel more comfortable going into that conversation. Then you're not ready if you're feeling like that. And if it's about you, then you got to do the work of coming to, from a healthier place. And it's okay to feel like that, but you need to call it at the same time.
Totally right. I think I liken it to public speaking. If you were going to go and give a TED Talk, it would be wildly unnerving to be on stage at a TED conference if you didn't really know what it was that you wanted to say or who was in the audience. God, what a terrible feeling. But if you knew exactly what it was that you wanted to talk about, it's really exciting to hit that stage because you have the points that you want to land. It's the same thing when we're going through looking for our next job thing. If you're just talking to somebody like, I have no idea, I hope I get a job, maybe they can help, I don't know. That's like going into a TED Talk without knowing what the hell you're talking about. Mm-hmm. If, on the other hand, you reach out to the person going, you're the perfect person for me to be talking, that's exciting. That's fun. And again, if the answer is, look, Nicole, I get what you're trying to do. That's awesome. I think it's really exciting and I'm totally rooting for you. We don't have that. That's okay. Because a couple of things may come of that. One, they don't have it now, but next time they'll go, wait, yeah, we didn't have that role when we talked to Nicole before, but she was so clear on what it was she wanted to do. We do have that role now. And so they reach back to you. Or they have a really great conversation with you that's totally about clarity. And their buddy Arun reaches out and says, do you know anybody that could do this? I'm like, yes, absolutely. Because Nicole said that's what she wanted to do. It increases your confidence. It protects your psyche. It keeps you from having the wrong conversations. And it certainly increases the likelihood that the right people will get back to you. You just be mushy. Mushy doesn't get anything.
Yeah, I think the root of this, what we're talking about, is running one's career like a high-performing company.
Totally.
And while doing that, one will be presented different decisions that they have to make in these conversations. Some of these decisions are one-way doors where you can't go back. Once you open the door and get to the other room, you can't go back. So identify those decision trees, those one-way doors. There may be a two-way door, but based on this conversation, I feel like there are few two-way doors. There's more one-way doors than the two-way doors. So I think having this door mindset of like which one I want to open, and then having no ors. Just what is it that you want to do? And then just open that door and have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So what's funny to me, but not really surprising, in the marketing, media, and entertainment world, there's a thing called a USP, which stands for a unique selling proposition. And any and all of us know that in order for a brand to really resonate with a consumer or customer, it needs to be clear on what it's going to deliver. It melts in your hand, not in your mouth. No, opposite. Melts in your mouth, not in your hand. There you go. And so what's funny, but again, not surprising, is that marketers who approach me, and you would imagine that there's a disproportionate number of people given my background that do come from those worlds, they're no better at this than anybody else. They completely forget that what they have done for their brands their whole lives is what they need to do for themselves. Give me that thing. What are you? Are you a renovator? Are you a 0 to 1? Are you a 1 to 100? Are you a turnaround person? Like, who are you? How am I supposed to think about you? And that's, as you said, Arun, it's exactly true. You have to think about it the same way you'd run your business, the same way you'd run your team. Also, port that into the rest of your life. Think about the successful relationships that you have. You don't just come off as this amorphous being. The people who love you because they know who you are. The people that need to love you, as in the people that are going to employ you or hire you to be on their boards or what have you, like they need to know who it is you are. And be courageous. Guess what? Not everybody's going to want us. And that's okay. You don't want to be with everybody. You want to be with the right ones.
I love this. This is an important note to end on, which is it's okay if people don't want to pick up on the other side of this equation. Like, it is okay. And in actual fact, we talked about this in a quick episode that I did when I talk about my own rejection, right? Like, there is a reason why that happened. I don't know what the hell the reason is yet, but I will one day. And so you have to remind yourself of that. I'd say the other thing that has been particularly transformative for your psyche is if you're having a hard time articulating your value, your unique value proposition, call somebody who you've worked with. Ask them. They will help you. If you're struggling to define it yourself, there are people who care about you, who have worked for you, who will help you define it. And you shouldn't be ashamed to ask about it. It's okay. Because sometimes you need that outside in perspective. And I know, Matt, that's what you do as an agent. I mean, I have to guess that there are times when your clients come to you and they're like, I just totally bombed that interview. I know they're not going to hire me. That doesn't mean they're not hireable, period. That means that it was a rough one and we have to learn and move on.
Yep. Totally right. Again, we talked about vulnerability. You do need to be vulnerable and to know to whom you can be vulnerable.
So, Matt, we started off with uncertainty in the market. We want to end with leadership. So the question that we have for you is, what's next for leadership in this age of uncertainty? How should leaders think about traversing this?
It'll sound like a broken record, but I put this out on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. I'm doing these truths as part of what the Accelerator's business is, that I believe as leadership, you have to, A, be really, really clear on what it is you as an organization are trying to do, and B, commit to it to a point where you just say it and do it and reinforce it over and over and over again. And I talk in this content that I did a while back about the reason we say ad nauseum. As a leader, you have to say and do the same thing so many times over that you think if you hear yourself say it one more time, you're literally going to puke. It's around then that your organization is starting to get it. Mm-hmm. So what I think that each of us in leadership roles needs is to be very clear on what it is that we are attempting to accomplish and why it matters, and then do not waver. Just keep being that thing. We all have some form of attention deficit disorder, and that's a luxury none of us should be allowed to afford. Own, commit, reinforce. That's your job as a leader.
I love
it. That was amazing. So, Matt, we always end our podcasts with 3 things that you want to leave behind for our audience. We spoke about, many different topics in this conversation. If we were to summarize 3 things that you are like, okay, here's the 3 leave behinds for the audience, what would they be?
It will surprise nobody that I'm going to start with the objective. So, number 1, be really clear on what it is you're looking to do, and make sure that you empower your personal and professional networks to go to work for you. They want to. They just need you to do the work first and what that is. And then I think I said a relentless campaign of positivity. I don't know that I've used that expression before, but I like it. I think that you have to just, once you've done those things of real clarity on the objective, real clarity in to whom you need to message that, just keep out there. Be relentless. Be positive, but don't make it all about you. Find ways to keep yourself in front of people in a way that's helpful to them. Wonder if you saw this. Wonder what you think about that. So Stay on it, but don't make it all about you.
That was amazing. Well, thank you, Matt. We are grateful for your time. We would love to come back. We'd love to have you come back to the show sometime in future. And we also want to thank our audiences. We know that you all are busy, so thank you for prioritizing us, and thank you for prioritizing, more importantly, yourself in your personal growth and professional growth. And till next time, see you
It's
soon.
been great fun. Thank you both. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Arun.